Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing? Well, I never come prepared for any talk. I don't know why. Maybe because we don't come prepared into this world anyway. And most people actually get confused with the way I look and, the kind of stuff that I actually wear. So maybe I'll just tell you a story before I actually tell you why I wear what I wear. How many of you remember your age 15? How many of you remember what you did when you were 15 years old? Could you put your hands up? Okay, so very few hands really. I'll say it again. How many of you remember what you did when you were 14? Very few hands again. Why 14? Okay, when I was 14 and a half, I ran away from home. So I didn't run away from home to my friend's house. I quite literally woke up one morning, stole money from my dad's pocket, went to school, came up with some stupid excuse to not show up in class because my friend knew I was up to something. I bought a cycle, and it wasn't one of those mountain bikes that allow you to cycle as fast as you can on a highway. It was one of those regular stunt bikes, those BMX. So it was one of those, because I always wanted a BMX as a kid. But my dad got me this market cycle, because he wanted to teach us about the rational in life. He didn't want us to do stunts. So I thought, hey, I have the money, I have the freedom, I'm going to buy that BMX, and I'm not going to figure out where I'm going to get the money for the next few days that I'm out of home. I bought my BMX, and I didn't know where I was going. I really didn't have a plan. I just wanted to cycle. And I wanted to cycle as far as possible because I wanted my family to be convinced that they had lost a daughter, that she was dead. I really didn't have any plans of getting back home. So it didn't matter what I went with or where I was going. I was just going to cycle. And at 14 and a half, you have all the energy in the world when you're angry. You have all the energy in the world when you hate your parents and you hate life and you hate society for calling you names. And I was one of those kids. So I had all the energy in the world. I didn't have to drink a sip of water when I was cycling. So I cycled it to another state. It was 112 kilometers. From the span from 10 o'clock in the morning when I got my cycle, because the shop was not open. So from 10 to about 6 o'clock, by 6:30, I reached that state. It was a town. Of course, I kind of also had to, call in a truck in the middle because it was pouring. I'm talking about my home country, Malaysia, where the highway there are really, really, really huge. And if you're on the highway and you're seen cycling as a kid, the cops and the guys on the toll, they're already keeping track of who you are because you will be really stupid. I mean, it's stupid to have a kid on the highway cycling. So either you've run away from home or either you're one of the workers' kids. So I had to use all of my street knowledge to understand and to come up with excuses to people who are going to ask me questions. On the other hand, I had to figure out the fact that I'm a girl, I'm going to get raped, right? So I went prepared. I actually stopped by the capital before I went further. I stopped by the capital, Kuala Lumpur, and I already figured out that I needed to cut my hair. Not that my hair was really long, but I did have a length that showed that I was a girl. It was pretty short, but you could make out I was a girl. So I walked into a barber's shop, and I told him to chop my hair really, really short, and he did that. Then I had to figure out what I was going to do with my breast. So I went into the bathroom, and I had to wrap my breast. Then I had to figure out what I was going to do with stuff in between my legs that I don't have. So I had to, pick up a jeans. that was meant for boys, because there's always like extra room over there, for what. But I had to. And I wore shorts inside it, just to give off the whole boy look. And people were really convinced I was a boy, because my throat was already dry since I was crying the night. And it really helped, people just thought I was a boy having puberty. Now I say the same thing to a lot of people when they ask me, are you having a sore throat? I say, no, I'm still going through puberty. But when I cycled, a lot of people thought a boy had run away from home. Nobody really keeps track of a boy running away from home. If you're a girl, they're really going to think more about it. When I reached the other side, I call the other side the town that I was sitting at, I really didn't know what I was into. So this was a really tiny town. I was already coming from another tiny town, but this was even tinier in itself. So everybody knew I was not from that town. They knew I was this odd one out, and they couldn't really place me. On top of that, there are hardly any Indians in that town. So they really, really, really couldn't place me. I decided to hide myself. And I had to figure out where I was going to sleep because I had no money. I had about $50, that's 50 Malaysian dollars. And I was already calculating in my head, I haven't got my periods yet, shit. I might need money to buy sanitary napkins. Oh, hold on, I'm supposed to be a boy. I shouldn't be having sanitary napkins. What am I going to buy instead? Tampons. So I was thinking about all the stuff that I have to keep in my pocket in case. Because if you're a boy, if you're seen as a boy who's running away, and I've convinced the entire town I'm a boy, I definitely don't want to show up with blood on my pants the next day. So I had to keep in mind all of these things. In $50, what am I going to do? I also wanted my cigarettes. And am I willing to part with my money for my cigarettes, or am I willing to part with my cigarettes for survival? At 14, you really don't think so much. I might be a little bit smart, and I might think about sanitary napkins and tampons, but I wasn't smart enough to think about the wastage of cigarettes. So I actually chose to buy cigarettes instead of buying food. Because at 14, you have all the energy in the world. You don't need food. I was living off the anger that I had from my parents and for everybody who didn't understand me. So I bought those cigarettes, and I slept in that coffee shop. So you have these coffee shops in Malaysia that kind of open at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I had all the time in the world at 5 o'clock in the morning to sit in that coffee shop. So I parked my bike, my cycle, took out my shoes, my shirts. I had to dress myself behind the coffee shop because everything else was soaking wet. I had to dry it all off. I sat with my shorts and a t-shirt. And I was smoking just to keep myself warm because it was pouring and I didn't want to catch pneumonia. So I kept smoking as much as I could, inhaling all that smoke and hoping it just warms me up. It did. But in front of me, there was something else actually warming me up. There was a nightclub. And I started dancing. I was actually sitting on the table and I was dancing, and then I realized I need to stop dancing because if somebody sees me from that side, they're going to come pick me up. Because people also kidnap kids in Malaysia. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. The nightclub, me sitting over there, and the bunch of people coming out. And then the bunch of people coming out, and a bunch of people going in, and a bunch of people looking at me, and there were 6 people looking at me. So then I had to pick up my bike, and I had to cycle as fast as I could. I'm going to fast forward again. So when I ran away from home, I had to do things to protect myself, correct? I had to protect the girl. So I took all measures to protect the girl inside of me. But what I really didn't know at 14 was there are many men who actually like boys and not girls. And they don't like boys in terms of I love you and I'm gay and I want to be with you. What I mean is, there are men who rape girls and there are men who rape boys. So for me at 14, I experienced that. The girl inside me didn't really have to go through it, but the boy inside of me had to go through that. When I came back home the next day through whatever means that happened and however my parents found me, 2 weeks after that, actually not 2 weeks, it was a month after that, I was taken to a psychiatrist because my parents couldn't understand why I ran away from home. Of course, I lied about what happened. Why would I tell my parents what happened? That's none of their business, really. Well, when they took me to the psychiatrist, they were so vulnerable. They were shaking. They couldn't make sense of anything. I was still being rebellious. I still told them, I'm not going to go and see some idiot. What is he going to tell me about my body? But they did, because all parents are vulnerable. All parents are scared, no matter how much they try to control a child like me or a child like you. They're really scared. They're really scared that they will lose you at any level, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, religiously, at every level. So they did what they had to do because they didn't know the answers. So they took me to a professional who is supposed to have the answers. And when I sat in the room in front of this doctor, in front of this psychiatrist, I went in with my school uniform. And our school uniform in Malaysia is sort of like a jumpsuit. It's a white T-shirt. It's a skirt which is linked to another coat on top. And because I was in my basketball team and in my school band, I was allowed to wear shorts and a shirt inside, only so I can remove my clothes really fast and run for practice. So I was given that kind of privilege. So when I walked into his cabin, he had this appearance of a girl trying to be a boy, according to him. Because my hair was short, remember? I had come back home after running away from home. He sits me down. He doesn't even ask me why I ran away. He says, you know what your problem is? You're a boy in a girl's body, and I'm here to help you. So this doctor was explaining. He was drawing sticks to me, human sticks. So he actually drew a girl stick figure and he drew a boy stick figure, and he explained it to me. He said it's called heterosexual. I said, yeah, I know what heterosexual is. Then he drew a girl and a girl. I said, yeah, I know what that is. It's lesbian. Then he drew a boy and a boy. And I said, I know what that is. It's called being gay. It's like, what are you trying to tell me? I know the stuff. I mean, we've had sex education in school. So then he draws a girl, and he draws another girl, and he draws a shadow of a boy. And he's trying to ask me, now do you know what this is? And I said, well, that's a shadow. Do you not know what it is? He said, oh, well, you're really smart. Well, I'm going to tell you what that is. That is a boy stuck inside your body because you want to be a boy. And I looked and I thought to myself, all right, this is the first one. How does a man who's 64 years old know what me, a 14-and-a-half-year-old girl who's still going through puberty, knows about my body? How does he know about what I want, and how does he know about my body? I don't know about my body. I don't know about what I want. I'm only 14 and a half. How does he know? So I got angry. Just the way I am. I get angry when people are stupid. Not that I'm saying I'm smart, but I think I knew at 14 and a half, I knew something about myself. The fact that I didn't know something about myself. So I trashed his office. I broke everything, and I said, you're an idiot. Why are you telling me that I needed sex change? He convinced me that at 18, I'm going to help you get a sex change. I'm going to help you go to Thailand and prepare you 3 years from now, and I'll convince your parents about this. And you can come with me, and I'll help you have a sex change. And I looked at him and said, I don't want to have a sex change. I might like boys now, I might like girls. I mean, God knows what I would like 10 years from now. Maybe I won't like anyone. So am I supposed to remove my genitals? I thought it was really stupid that, for me, an adult behaved like that. So when my parents actually went into his cabin after he sent me out, And he told them exactly what he told me, and they came out. I could see their fallen faces. I mean, I thought I was angry. My parents were not just angry. They were shaking. They were trembling. My mom is one of those Indian women who fall under the category of your typical Indian Maharashtrian housewife who probably just had an 11th standard, who had never learned a word of English, and married my dad, who's this outsider Indian, who introduced her to meat, to beef, to alcohol, to cigarettes, and to his side of the family, who's all crazy. Or maybe modern, I would say. So when she came out of the cabin, you could have just imagined her face. I mean, my dad himself, with the knowledge and the experience and the exposure he has, his eyes were red. Okay, and this is a guy who's really dark. My dad is a really dark South Indian. When his eyes are red, it must have been really red. And my mom is the opposite. She's really fair. And when she came out, she was red. She was red, she had tears. She was trying to control herself from breaking down by what she heard. And I'm still prancing about it. And I'm like, can we go now? I'm really bored. Like, why did you bring me to this guy? And she's like, behave. Your dad just paid $75 to see him. I said, well, who asked you to take me to him? You could have just given me $75. I'll tell you what's wrong with me. But no, nobody really believes a kid, right? Why is that story really important for me, apart from everything else that was given in my introduction? It's because that was the first time I had heard voices. I don't know how many of you know what hearing voices means. So in mental illness or in mental disorders, there's a diagnosis called schizophrenia. How many of you know what schizophrenia is? Could you raise your hands up, please? All right, few of you. So, somebody with schizophrenia is said to be someone who hears voices that other people don't hear. And I started hearing voices at a very young age, before I was 14. The only difference was, at the age of 14 and a half, I decided to follow my voice. And that voice told me, you might have run away, which I did. I acted upon my voice. Fast forward a bit, then in 2002, at the age of 22, when the voices took over and made me do things, I went into my college cabin and I took out a knife and I told my professor, I'm going to kill everybody inside here. That is how they realized there was something wrong with me. Wrong in their eyes, maybe because I acted upon it. Fast forward. 2008, I decided to stop my medications because from 2002, I was put on medications for schizophrenia. I was put on medications for hearing voices that other people don't hear and for seeing things that other people don't see. They call it visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, olfactory hallucinations, tactile hallucinations. But when they put medications on me, I was 30 kgs above this. This body was important for me because as a 14-year-old kid whose only confidence came from basketball, martial arts, tennis, swimming, and doing everything else that gave me a really good body image, to have 30 kgs on it, to have saliva drooling out of your mouth, to be sleeping 20 hours a day and waking up and falling into your plate of food because you can't stay awake because of those medications. When you couldn't move, I mean, who would not want to stop their medications? So my parents had to, very often during my treatment, my mom had to move my legs from me while I was sleeping. I couldn't even get up to move my legs. It was rusted, just like Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, if you're aware about the story. My body was rusted. Sometimes I would wake up with soiling my sheets. Soiling means when you've crapped in your pants and you don't know it, because you put on so much of medications, you're so sedated, you have absolutely no body control. You pee and you poo and you don't know it, and then you get up and you're like, what was that? and you're so sedated you can't even clean yourself. Again, it was really traumatic for my parents. They couldn't understand, now what? Now that we have her controlled, and now that she's not doing all the things that she was doing when she was 14, it's even worse. So they were okay that I stopped my medications, because it took them time to understand what was happening. It took them time to see that I was actually better hearing voices. So I'm going to fast forward, I'm going to fast forward, I'm going to fast forward. And then came 2008 when I stopped, when I also moved out of home and I had to try to find myself. Because it was getting difficult for my parents to see me acting upon the voices and what I saw. Then came 2010. By then I was already 30. And by 30, you have already developed some sense of life, some level of what life means. It's got nothing to do with being crazy or not being crazy. But by then, my parents saw me as an adult. And they let me do anything and everything I wanted to do because I was responsible for it. So today, the reason I'm wearing this, I'm telling you that story because this means something to me politically speaking. Because most people who see a tie, they see a lady with a short hair, or they see a coat, or this, or these pants, or the shoes, they will conclude two things. You must be a butch lesbian, or you must be a girl trying to be a boy, or a man. But for me, it's that part of my story, but it's also another story, because for a very long time in my life, I couldn't button myself up. I couldn't tie a tie, even though I could do it in school. I couldn't tie my shoelace. I have difficulty wearing regular pants, so I can't. So my clothes are very limited. I can't wear a skirt or a sari anymore. Even though I would love to, it's limited. This was because in 2011, I had a surgery for a brain tumor, which left one side of my body with partial epilepsy. So my coordinations got damaged. Of course, today when I tell people I can't butter myself up, they do it for me. It kind of becomes a good excuse to ask people out, It's fun. They also think it's cute. So when I can't do stuff, I just ask them to do it for me. Normally, I have a support person for that. Other people with different disabilities. You probably would have seen someone with visual impairment who's blind, who maybe uses a wheelchair. They all have a support person. How many of you are aware about this? If you could raise your hands up. Awesome. So you've seen them, right? It's physical disabilities. They always have someone with them who's helping them with stuff. So when I got into the platform of mental health advocacy, nobody could see my disability. It was invisible. They didn't understand it. They're always saying, why do you have to move so much? Why are you constantly restless? You're always moving. Can't you sit still? And I looked at them and I didn't know what to say. It took me some time. It took me courage to tell them about the kind of issues I have. And until I told them that, they didn't understand. So for quite some time, I had a support person. People who would invite me had to also fly my support person, who will make sure I behave. I show up on time. I go to the bathroom on time so I don't have to run. That's what a support person basically does. Helps me get dressed, helps me does blah, 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 blah. But then I realized what a waste of my money when I can get other people to do it for me. And I said, hey, that's the same kid I was when I was 14. I was a rascal. I was a brat. I was cheeky. I would flirt with everyone. But the problem was, society had this thing, If you were a girl and you flirted with everybody, it gave a wrong impression. It was difficult. Because it concluded that you were easy. It concluded that you probably didn't have enough respect for yourself. It concluded that you were cheap. It concluded that you wanted to sleep with everybody, but somehow when a guy does it, it was okay. So today I actually thank feminists for that. I don't call myself a feminist. I call myself a schizophrenist. And I call myself a schizophrenist because as you have an artist, as you have a chemist, a psychiatrist, a feminist, everybody has these identities that they own. And someone with schizophrenia is still being stigmatized and discriminated all around the world, till date. It is so invisible when it's something that happens to every one of us and we don't even know it. So when people say schizophrenic, it's an adjective. And I become a disease. I become an illness for everybody, always trying to fix me and tell me what to do. So I said, hey, I'm going to call myself schizophrenist, and I'm going to own it because I'm going to define myself with that. And I'm going to tell the world that I can be a lot of things. That same kid who drew art on tables is an artist today. I could never study in a regular classroom, even though my friends were in that classroom. People say that I've written a book and I've had scholarly articles and I've published all of them, but I do have difficulties in pronunciation and spelling. It's just that you don't see it because you're too busy looking at the way I look. So it's a good camouflage. I was the same kid who was thrown out of class almost every 20 minutes. I was sent to correctional facilities and camps. I was the same kid who, when I went, my teachers were asking me, why didn't you go into drama? Why didn't you try theater? Why didn't you try acting? And I would destroy the entire stage. They thought something was wrong with me. They thought I was a horrid kid that was only breaking things and I needed to be fixed somewhere. But I was that same kid. And I've never learned art. I've never learned writing. I've never learned acting. But I am an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a pantomime. Because somewhere down the line, I had to fight everything that I was and everything society kept telling me to be and not to be. And it takes time. It takes time when you have to keep searching for yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes you end up running away, and sometimes you don't. But that identity is so important for me because it's led me to my life purpose, which is influential in everything I do. When people ask me what I do a lot of things. I have an organization, I teach in school, but I'm also all of that. And everything that I do has now become an extension of who I am. How many of you hear voices? Or how many of you think you hear voices, if I can see your hands? Brilliant. This is probably the first audience I have where they've actually said you hear voices, because most people think it's something to do with the disease. So I'm going to tell you why I hear voices. I hear voices because some of them are just sexy. But I also hear voices because I'm a good listener. If you just close your eyes and you listen to the silence in the room and not my voice, you would hear a lot of voices inside of you. And not many people can do that because we live in a society that's constantly making noise. They always want you to be like this. Nobody can sit still. They say I'm hyperactive and restless. Did you know that the human body cannot sit still for more than 5 seconds, more than 10 seconds? Everybody's moving somewhere or the other. If you're not moving over here, you're moving inside, you're vibrating. That's physics. You're constantly vibrating at different levels all the time. So for me, it's not a disease, it's not an illness, it's a way of being. And that's how I find my identity. And I'm going to repeat it. When you find your identity, it's when you find out what your life purpose is. That life purpose has allowed me to not think about money. We're constantly told that whatever work we pick up, whatever education, whatever we want to study, has to give us this much income because it will give you this life and that many kids that you can have, and that many relationships, whatever, whether you're dating a boy or a girl, none of my business. But that's how we live our lives, right? That's how we look at our education. That's how we look at everything that we are. And very often when I'm actually fighting and I'm arguing with the youth, I've had a couple of students who were in the category of 24, and I fought with them because they would keep telling me, we need to change the way the education system is. And I said, why? They said, because it sucks. I did my master's from this college. It's one of the best colleges, but it's not taught me anything, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I come from the same education system. I don't see anything wrong with me. I mean, I was thrown out of it, even worse. So today when I work with them, I tell them the same thing. Maybe there is a system, and the system sucks, and the system sucks all around the world. And there are many people who are doing what it takes to change those systems. But at the end, at any life, in any part of your life, whether it's your education, or whether it's your job, or the best relationship in the world, if you're not feeling good inside of here and inside over here, no amount of work and education or relationship is really going to give you your life. Because I've come back from the dead, literally. I mean, I've attempted suicide, I have cut myself, I've got scars all over me. And my tattoos do not cover my scars up. My tattoos actually enhance my scars, and I love them. And my scars are an important reminder to who I am. Because that's how I've learned. I've learned that if my health is not good, it doesn't matter what I chase. Whether I'm chasing a boy or a girl, whether I'm chasing that degree or that money, it's irrelevant. Because I first need to get up. I need to wake up to walk it and get it done. So for me, that is my message even when I talk to my kids at school. And many of my kids in school today who are 12-year-old boys and girls who are themselves bullies, it's difficult for them, because they have no role models. They have absolutely no role models in the world. They come from families where there's so much of violence. They come to school, and when they go out, they see the other parts of India that are not much of a role model to these kids themselves. And it's a very difficult process for me to make my change. Because when I talk about India as a country, I talk about 65% of the population being below 35 and 50% being below 30. And majority of the people in that age group are about 18 or 19. And then you have kids. You have the little ones who are below 12. And quite honestly, the future is not us. The future is not me. The future is not you. Your job or my job is to create that future and that world for those kids. Because it is them. And I keep seeing how there are absolutely no role models for them. They can't come up with a single name of maybe an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old that they look up to. And I find it very, very distressing that they can't. In a population that is so large, none of my kids, 58 of them, can't come up with a single name. And when I spend time with them, they consider me their friend, and I have to remind them about my age. And I said, don't ever confuse me as being that same person. I think all of you should breathe, because you're giving me this really stressful look. I'm not trying to stress you out. Try breathing. It really helps. I don't know how many of you actually breathe. How many of you breathe? No, I don't think you breathe. So the message I give my kids is breathe. Because one of the techniques I have used for myself with the seizures that I also have is the process of breathing. I mean, there are other people there who could teach you how to breathe, the different ways of breathing, but it's really very simple. And whether it's breathing, whether it's hearing voices, whether it's seeing things that are not there, I also say that I might see things that are not there, that you can't see, but how many of you don't see things that are even there? You know, I think many of us do that. When I speak to people and I ask them about their relationships, many of them don't even see things that are there. When the person is right beside you or in front of you, they don't see them. They're only interested in seeing what they want to see. They don't really want to see the person. They don't really want to hear the person. Nobody is a listener. Nobody is listening anymore because we think listening needs to be done by this over here, or we think talking needs to be done by this over here, or we think understanding a person needs to be done by this over here, or we think making love to a person needs to be done by this or this over here. That's how humans perceive one another and experience life and study and learn. But that's not what it is. You never do it from these places. These are just one. You actually do it from here. If you can listen to someone from here, you've made it. And if you can just do that, you could solve any problem out there. But it really starts from listening to yourself. And that voice can be scary. It can be tormenting. It can be troubling. It can be disturbing. It can be distressing. It can be horrendous. It can tell you to do the wrong stuff. It can tell you to do the right stuff. But it's really up to you to figure out what it means and what it's trying to say. And that's your interpretation. Nobody else is going to teach you how to look inside your body and interpret your identity. Because with that comes your life purpose. And it takes you time. So I'm going to end it right now. And I'm just going to ask you to be good listeners. Thank you for listening.
Anyone has any questions for Reshma? Like we take questions for 5 minutes?
Hello, ma'am.
I can't see you.
I think people who don't have their own life try to create drama in other people's life. So how not to be victim of those negative thoughts?
They're thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Thoughts can't hurt you.
Yeah.
It's actually very simple. There's a saying, don't subscribe to people's dramas.
Okay.
Don't subscribe to them, you know? It's like on Facebook. You just got to unfollow and you got to not subscribe.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Okay.
Thoughts can't hurt you.
Yeah.
Hi, Sanjay here. I have two questions actually. The first question is, relating to your relationship with the psychiatrist. So if somebody is in acute depression, these days teenagers generally are in depression and they themselves don't know. So what would you suggest to them? In terms of their moral mentality and how strong they should be.
So when we talk about depression, we look at it, we have actually redefined it. We always call it how we redefine life. You redefine what you're experiencing. And one definition for it is depression is irrational expectations of what success means. And we're always chasing that. And if you actually think about it, success is not necessarily in terms of your ambition. Success for tomorrow, success in your relationships, in your family, in yourself. And when we work with them, we just tell them to think about what's really affecting them. What is it that they want, what they truly want, that they're not getting, and what is it that they're trying to be okay with? You know, very often we are settling in life, And even kids are doing that. They're settling. You are settling because you're underestimating yourself. Depression that also comes with feelings of suicidal, or when somebody also attempts a suicide, we're always rushing to fix and help someone. And sometimes we don't need to do that. We just need to help them see a different picture. So depression, or the feeling of death or dying, or the fact that I feel like I want to die and kill myself, is not something wrong. It is a part of me that I'm trying to kill. It's just that we look at suicide and depression from a so closed, stigmatizing point of view that we think it is wrong for you to think of suicide. So we kind of approach it from a maybe Buddhist or Zen point of view, just a philosophy. But in changing that philosophy, it's really what works. When you actually tell yourself, hold on, you don't need to rush into the act of suicide, but you just got to be with it. You have to experience it. There's nothing wrong in depression. There's nothing wrong in the experience of depression. I don't see why, if we can be happy, we can't be sad. If we can be so ecstatic, we can't be really suffering. I don't see why we can't. Because we've been fed by we shouldn't. So by just telling my kids that, they actually are just there. Very often, they come to school, some of them are crying, and I ask them, do you want to talk about it? They're like, no, I just want to be. And they're just there. They go out of class, they're sitting, they're staring, they're doing absolutely nothing. And that in itself has changed them. So that's what I would suggest, just help them redefine what it means. When you can influence someone's thought, as I'm doing right now, I'm just giving you different thoughts to think of and take back home. But when you can do that, you start becoming a change maker. You just change the way the person is.
Right. Coming back to my second question, thank you so much for answering that. With respect to the education system, well, for me, I'm in science background, so I'll talk only limited to that. A state in South India, Kerala, so there like 90% of the population there are literate. So for a growing economy like India, science and technology plays a big role, right? So people need to know what kind of science project needs to be initiated by the government so that we progress further ahead, right? But in spite of having so much of literacy there, I'm from Bangalore and I keep visiting Kerala a lot. So not everybody know the importance of this science and technology. They don't play a direct role in a lot of science projects. So where is the literacy rate what is it helping? That's my question in one way. So I think we need a change in the education system.
That's true. But I think when you're changing the education system, you have to also change society. Because when you're talking about education, you're also talking about the baggage that we come, where your parents in India at one point wanted everybody to become doctors, engineers, lawyers, architects, now psychologists. And everybody's rushing for the same thing. So when everybody's rushing for the same thing, there are only so many education institutions that have that many seats left. So when few students get in through hook, crook, or grades, or whatever it is, the rest who don't get in will die off, right? They have nowhere else to go, or they will commit suicide, which also adds to the mental health state. But parents don't know what they're doing because they themselves are stuck in the same society, in the same want. My child can only become successful if he does this and he reaches that institute. There's no other way to be successful in the world. So it's all connected, whether it's education, technology, society, health. It's all and each and every one of our jobs to make that change. I often say we need to start advocacy at home. You're familiar with the word advocacy, right? When you advocate for yourself, when you speak for your rights, you have to start from home. And it's a very difficult process. You have to constantly be educating your parents, because our parents don't come from the same literate world or the same exposure. And it is our job to really educate them. Of course, it's difficult, but when you start educating your parents, they tend to look at the picture differently. They might throw you out, they might slap you, they might force you to get married. It comes with the baggage, that's life, and that's no running away from it. But it's something we have to do. We can't just expect a system to change. It's like, the example I can give you is, there's a system that exists in the world that doesn't give someone like me rights. I do not have the legal capacity. A legal capacity means I cannot sign contracts, I cannot have a bank account, I cannot get married under the Hindu contract law because I have an unsound mind. That's the Constitution of India. There are 200 laws that do not permit me to stand here. I cannot fly or take an airplane, fly a plane without being sedated, having a doctor on board, and anybody in here can call up an asylum and say, you know, I have a problem with Reshma, she's talking about these kind of stuff, I think she's having a symptom. They would come, they would drag me in just because I have a label called schizophrenia. So when I entered the world of advocacy, I realized I had absolutely no rights, including Facebook. It's a contract. To sign a contract, I need to be of sound mind according to the law. And we kept going to the government and we kept saying, you know, you must give me my legal capacity, then only can I get a job. The government says, dikhata sahi. You have all these ideas, why don't you show it to us? Which is true on their part. But then I realized, more than laws out there and more than changing the system called the government, my problem was society. Because even if the government gives me that legal status and says, here you go, you can sign that document that will give you that job, that employment, right? And I can go and sit in that cabin that is paying me so much so. But in that job, there are a lot of people around me. And if those people don't accept my schizophrenia, and if they don't understand me as a human person, if they don't know how to help me when I'm crying, and they keep stigmatizing me, I'm going to go back home and I'm not going to like my job. So screw the job and screw my legal capacity. It's the people around me that were making the difference in my life. And these are examples from my life. I still stand here without any legal capacity. But I've educated the people around me and they accept me for who I am. So that's really what it is, advocating for yourself.